Welcome to the Retail Tech Podcast. Today, my guest is Vikrant Mathur from a company called Future Today, which is in the digital media and TV and advertising business. How are you today,
Very
Vikrant?
good. Thank you. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you for joining the show. So let's start by giving us an overview of the company and yourself, maybe a little background.
Sure. Yeah. So the company Future Today, it's a 19 going on 20-year-old company. It feels a little surreal to even say that. But we started in 2006 with a very sort of basic philosophy that online video would fundamentally change the way people consume content. And, today it sounds very obvious, but, going back to 2006 when YouTube was just taking off, it hadn't even been acquired by Google yet. It was a very revolutionary idea. And so we started the company with a service called iFood.tv, which was essentially a video platform for food and cooking enthusiasts. The idea was if it's 7 in the evening, you want to make something. If you're anything like me, you have no idea how to do it. You could either go to Google and search for recipes, text based that you could print and then follow along, or you could come to iFood and essentially find a video that'll show you how to make meatballs and pasta. And so as we were trying to grow iFood as a service, we ran across platforms like Roku. There was a competitor to Roku called Boxy. Yahoo had a product called Yahoo Connected Television. And so we launched iFood as an app on all of these different devices. And as we looked at the landscape and sort of the growth that we saw, and again, this was 2010 when nobody really knew or understood what streaming was. Netflix was sort of moving away from its DVD business. Roku had been spun out of Netflix and trying to build out a neutral third-party player. And as we looked at the landscape, we felt that there were two opportunities for us. One was we felt like we could go beyond food and cooking as a content category and launch apps and channels and other categories that would make sense for folks to consume through streaming platforms. And so we launched a service called Happy Kids, which is our flagship service for kids and families, content that they can consume. And subsequently, we launched an app called Fawsome, which is our general entertainment app, movies, TV shows, and it was more geared towards adults. And in addition to launching our owned and operated, we also realized that as the space was growing, one, there were more competitors to Roku that were coming into the space, so more devices. Because of so many devices, there was a need for all of these device manufacturers to have a lot of apps and content on the platform. So they wanted to be able to onboard a lot of content onto those devices. From a content owner's perspective, we felt like there was a need for them to be able to launch their apps across all of these different devices at scale. And then from a brand advertising perspective, we felt like there was a need for these brands to be able to connect, all of these audiences and buy them at scale without having to do like 3,000 deals with 3,000 publishers. And so having built the technology and the platform that we were using for ourselves, we felt like we could open it up and make it available to our content partners or OEM partners and brand partners so that we could essentially glue these three ecosystems together. And so we launched a B2B offering where we work with hundreds of content partners now, and we run apps and channels for them across all major streaming devices. And then we take all of that inventory and go represent it to brands, agencies, both from a programmatic standpoint as well as a direct standpoint so that we could monetize it for them. So that's our business in
Okay.
a nutshell over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And having started really in 2006, it seems like a long time, but it really is a short time
Right.
with all the change and improvements and developments. It's just the pace of change is like mind-boggling how fast things are moving. So, So would you say that the future today is really a content or a technology company? I know there is both.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which,
I would say it's a
yeah,
technology-enabled content company, right? Because I
okay.
think and that's been, one of the main sort of changes in the media industry, right? Where back in the day, content owners, all they cared about was producing the best content that they could, and they would go and sell it to the networks. And the networks cared about producing and or curating the best content that they could. And then they would go and distribute it through the MVPDs, right? And all the MVPDs cared about was managing their bottom line with respect to carriage fee and whatnot. But going in and laying the pipes or satellites and providing that access to the consumer. And so it was sort of a three-tiered system, which I think streaming has really flattened completely, right? So you are seeing, companies like Amazon, for example, that own their own device, that own their own content with MGM studios and whatnot, producing their own content as well with Prime Video. They have their own services, right? With Prime Video, and they have their own advertising infrastructure and technology stack with Amazon DSP. So it's really undergone that change where now you can't be just one. You have to really think about all the different sort of elements in the value chain and think about, okay, how can we contribute and how can we add more value to each link in the chain. So to answer your question, technology is a core piece. It's our DNA, it's our genesis. That's who we are. That's my background. I don't come from the media industry. Both Alok and I, my business partner, we used to work at Microsoft, and so we're technologists at heart. That's really where we see the innovation happening. That's what we want to bring to the industry. But I think the time is right for us to be able to deploy all these different types of technologies and really marry media with technology to provide user with that experience that couldn't be provided earlier because it was a very dumb pipe and it couldn't
Mhm.
support a lot of this intelligence and curation.
Right, right. That's a very interesting journey coming from technology in Microsoft into the movie business. How did
Right.
that come about? Were you
Yeah,
just a
it was
fan of movies or?
y- well, I, I think we were both very interested in the media industry in general. And, graduating out of business school, we wanted to do something of our own. And so had sort of that entrepreneurial mindset and really saw, an opportunity in the space where, with online video, we felt like, as I said, it would really revolutionize, how the industry operated. And obviously, the iPhone launched, and then the app stores for Android and iOS launched, and then Roku and the streaming devices launched. And so it's been a journey, right? But we always felt like more and more consumption would happen via video as opposed to reading through a bunch of things. And so it was a little bit of that entrepreneurial mindset, that background in technology, which made us feel like we could bring all the elements of technology into this new user experience and really sort of find a niche for ourselves. And I think a little bit of it was the right place, right time, where the industry was just starting, and so we could learn with the industry, we could make mistakes, which wouldn't prove to be fatal, and continue to learn from it and evolve and grow because the industry was so nascent.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting part of like really startups or companies is that founding story and the signals and the conviction that the founders had at any specific point of time that led them to take so much risk and start something brand new that nobody else saw. And especially like for like streaming video, 2006 was really early on. So that must have like been a combination of a really strong conviction and belief and the data that you had that led you to believe to that? So that's very interesting. It's a different topic. It's just really interesting for me to
Yeah.
to learn about how like founders' minds work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. And that's and we have, we haven't raised any capital, so we've completely bootstrapped the company. And I feel, to your point, that has sometimes looking back, we feel like we should have raised money, but then I also, on the flip side, feel like that has been a big reason as to why we've continued to exist and grow, because it's hard for an investor to have that kind of patience to stick around for 20 years
right.
without seeing an exit or some sort of return on capital. And we've gone through the 2008 financial crisis. Even when we started in the streaming space, it was too early, right? There was no money to be made. People, there was no volume, there was no audience, right? So we felt like we were 3 to 5 years ahead of the curve. But it's, even if you look at Roku, and when we launched on Roku in 2010, it's been 15 years. So it's taken us 15 years and a pandemic to really get to where we are as an industry.
Yeah. The pandemic effect is always there now. So
Yeah,
let's talk about I guess, the streaming TV market and business.
sure.
One clarification, when you say app, you mean a channel, really, right? Like on these, like on Roku, what you think of as an app is what I, as a consumer, think of a channel, right?
Right. So think of so there's, and again, the terminology can get confusing because different people use it different ways. But if you look at a service like Netflix, it's essentially an app. You could call it a channel, but it's a downloadable experience where you download the app onto your device, whether it be your phone, whether it be your TV, whether it be your Roku, and then you launch the service, and you go find the content that you want. So that's really what we started with, and that's really where we have our biggest sort of footprint even today, which is people going to the app stores, or channel stores, if you want to call them that, but downloading these services onto their device and then interacting and engaging with the content that's available as part of the service through that experience of launching the service and then browsing through and finding something to watch. So that's really our forte. We have also launched fast channels, which are, basically a 24/7 programmed feed of content that you can, similar to the traditional, cable watching experience. You can, you've got a list of 200 channels, you flip through the programming guide, and, you know, whatever's on is on at that point in time. So it's more appointment viewing as opposed to on-demand viewing. And we do that as well. So for folks that want to engage with that 24/7 linear experience, we have that as well. But the vast majority of our viewership is, Happy Kids as a downloadable service, Possum as a downloadable service with contents available on demand, free ads supported that folks can go and consume and watch.
How do you like, because it's a pretty crowded, space, and it's getting even more crowded, every day. How do you stand out, and how do you like show that differentiation to consumers with your channels?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of perhaps two or three different things. First and foremost, it has to be about the content because now you have, so many different services that it's it's really imperative that the content that you're providing is unique and differentiated. So, we have a library of about 300,000 videos that we manage, movies, TV shows, creator content. And so there's something for everybody in there. And that's the reason why we created Happy Kids as a separate experience for our kids and families, because we feel like the content needs when you're, in a co-viewed environment with your kids around, or you're co-viewing with, your parents, whatever. It's a very different experience, both from a content standpoint, from a curation standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, as compared to a more traditional service where you have content for adults. And so that's the first piece, right? Which is having a really vast library of content, which can appeal to, just about everybody, and using that as a really as an attraction for consumers to come in and watch the content. So that's one. The second piece is really, leveraging the technology and building out a consumer experience that's appealing to the users from a discovery standpoint, as an example, from a recommendations standpoint, as an example, right? From an advertising standpoint, as an example. So being able to really surface the right content in front of the right user at the right time, and then building out that experience of delivering that content, which is, most meaningful to them. So that's sort of the second element of it. And then the third element of it is the business model that we've had, where even though we compete with the likes of, Netflix and Hulu and HBO and Peacock and others, our model has always been completely free ad supported since 2006. And so there's no friction for our users to use our app. If you find a movie through search, it literally is one click. You launch the app, you go into the movie, it starts playing, right? And so as opposed to, having to sign up for the service or having to pay $2.99 or $3.99 to rent out a movie and use your credit card and things like that. And so we've really tried to make that experience of, coming into our app and hopefully sticking around with it so seamless and easy that people can go in and out as they please.
Okay. Are your apps or your app or channels also available as like downloadable apps on like in the iOS App Store? Or
They
you
are, yes.
okay. So it's not just on the TV distribution channels, it's also
Yes,
just in the regular. Okay.
correct.
All right. Do you also create original content, or do you have a studio that does that kind of work as well?
Yeah, so we've just started to dabble with it. Last year, we produced two feature films and two game shows, and that was, a very interesting and very exciting experience for us, and
All right.
it's worked out well. So we're going to continue with it this year as well. We're hoping to scale that up in our own small way, but that's a big area of focus for us as well, right? And it all goes back to, differentiation from a content perspective, where to the
Mhm.
extent that we could give our users something new, something unique to consume and look forward to and come back for, it really helps with stickiness and engagement, right? And
Okay.
also from a brand advertising standpoint, I think being able to give opportunities to our brand partners to be part of that experience, if they want to be, opens up new doors for us, and just makes the conversations a lot more engaging and deeper.
Yeah, yeah, that I mean that's a whole business different business, right? It's
Correct.
just the production side and actors. How is so like right now everybody's talking about how video is being generated by AI.
Correct.
How do you think that's going to impact that production side of the business?
Yeah. No, I think we're seeing some very interesting use cases pop up, right? Whether it be leveraging AI for simple, transcription, subtitling, perhaps even dubbing, right? There are companies that are starting to specialize in it. And depending on the format of the content and who the content's appealing to, it could be more appealing or less appealing, right? Across these different features that are now potentially available through AI. But, being able to, from a post-production and processing standpoint, right, being able to take footage that you've created, enhance it or supplement it using AI, right, and being able to either not have the cost that you would traditionally have from a post-production standpoint, editing standpoint, and being able to shorten that workflow, or whether it be, adding additional content or footage onto the, whatever you've shot to enhance and augment that viewing experience, right? There are all sorts of different things that are being tried as we
Yeah.
speak, right? Obviously, there's questions around IP and regulations and ethics and all of those things. But setting all of that aside, I'm actually very excited about how technology can really one, enhance the experience, two, lower the cost of production, right? Um, and three, make it a lot more engaging for the users, right?
Right. Right. Yeah,
So
it's very
there's
interesting.
benefits for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's two parts to what AI is doing to us. Is one is what is available right now and what this app does and what that model does on a regular basis, and they keep coming up with new models.
Right.
But then the other part is like what is possible in the future based on what we see now. Maybe 2 years ago, we couldn't even imagine these things.
Yeah.
We weren't even talking about it because we had no sign of this possibility. But now the 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 fact that potentially in X number of years, 1 year, 2 years, I don't know, I could put a script into Sora and it would create a 15-minute, whatever long movie
Yeah.
for me.
Absolutely.
That's like amazing or crazy. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I think this is already happening where you have platforms where you could just give them a URL and they will spit out a 15-second or a 30-second advertisement for that business using the stock imagery or using the images and the information that is publicly available in Google, on their website, things like that. So it's already happening where I would otherwise have to spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to create a 15-30 second creative, not to mention the 6 to 8 week time that it would take for me to do it, and all the overhead and the paperwork and the legal and the permissions and all of that stuff. And now, within minutes, I could have a 30-second ad that I could run as a local business, as an example, right? On my local TV station. So it's incredible how what the pace of innovation is, and two, how these things are being built where it's making the system so much more efficient and interesting.
So with that part of the business becoming more, let's say, automated
Mhm.
or going towards that, then what is the value? Like, what's the differentiator for distribution channels or for even like specific channels and what you offer to advertisers? Like,
Right.
that really helps you, for example, as a channel that you can just maybe test 10 different ads for a
Right.
customer
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that what's happening right now?
Yeah. So, imagine if you're a local car dealership, a car company, and you've got, 200 different dealerships all across the country. In the past, you would have, one offer that you're running nationwide, and you have a creative or a campaign that you've got, which is running nationwide, saying, this Christmas we're offering 0% APR on all the cars. And the messaging was, it was made for the masses. Now what you could do is now you could create on the fly, potentially, right? 20, 50 different creatives. You could say, this is the offer that we're going to run in Nashville, Tennessee, versus this is the offer that we're going to run in Seattle, Washington. And not only that, you could customize the creative, right? So those offers could be put on each of those creatives, right? So the creative that's running, it could be 80% of the creative is exactly the same, but maybe the other 20% is, a woman saying 0% APR on the cars in Nashville, versus 1.99% APR in Washington, as an example. So one, you could, have multiple creatives that you're running, you're testing, but most interestingly, you could now optimize on the fly. So if you somehow figure out that there's, one image or, one woman saying the offer that's, working much better from a conversion standpoint than another person saying the same offer, you could now optimize on the fly and you could change the creative literally in real time, right, across all the markets that you're now running to get that sort of optimization effect. So I think it just opens up so many different possibilities from that standpoint, right? But I think to your point, there will be, once we sort of get to a steady state, there will be commoditization of some of these workflows, right? Where it'll just become table stakes. Where the value will still be is, one, what is the underlying message, right? So what is that script, as an example, that is being used to create the 15 or 20-second episode or, an hour-long documentary? And then how do you do it? How do you narrate it and sort of put it together in a way that feels very much like the native experience that we've had, as opposed to a machine curated experience where you feel like you're just going through a bunch of slideshows with somebody narrating the story in the back, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really where we need a lot more innovation, just from a storytelling standpoint, and there's a lot of work that's being done there. But yeah, I mean, if you have an amazing idea and script, and you sort of tell that story and you use the right, technology to tell that story, you could potentially, it's like self-publishing of books,
Yeah. Yes.
right? You could really do this in your basement and put it up on all different platforms, YouTube, Pluto, us, Roku, etc. Um, and let the consumers speak.
Test it out. Yeah. Test it out and see. So when you look at uh the cycle of the teams that used to or do right now put together these ads or creatives and movies, each one of these roles, so there is like probably the photographer, there is a videographer, there is the editor, there is the director, the actors. Every one of them is going to be impacted differently by
Correct.
this change, and some of them may not even exist in the
Right.
future.
Yes. No, absolutely. And it's a little bit scary, right?
Yeah,
Not just from an economic
especially
perspective.
for people that are in that business. Yeah.
Yes. One, from an economic perspective, right, as to how families, households are going to be affected, but then also from a social perspective, right, where, we already talk about, the gap, income inequality, things like that, and how it's leading to, a whole bunch of social problems and issues, right? Now, with this next wave of automation and technology, right, it's gonna essentially increase that divide and separation, right? And
Yeah.
so, how does, from a social standpoint, how does that change the dynamics, the political, sort of landscape and things like that? It's very interesting, but also I think a little bit scary.
Yeah, it can definitely be so because we have a lot more questions right now than we have answers. We
Right.
have a lot, and a lot of people that are building these models, these large companies, they come out and they say, "Don't worry, there's going to be jobs. There are going to be more jobs." And I know his job is going to be safe, but what about the rest of the people? And as a business owner, you have a responsibility to use the tools that are available. So you cannot justify
Yeah.
just employing people because I mean, so I think there's definitely a balancing act. what I've seen and what I personally am trying to like implement and figure out even better is all of these roles that are already existing. Maybe they don't need to go away, but they need to fundamentally change. So the writer in a movie,
Right.
that's very important. How is that going to work? Maybe we will still need writers, but they
Yes.
need to do the writing in a different way.
Correct.
We still need editors. We still need these things, but the editor is going to be using all these AI tools
Right.
instead of like manually moving things up and down, maybe.
Right.
So I think that's like the part that I think there is a lot of potential that we don't know yet.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I feel like, we're trying to build the plane as we're flying it. So, there will be some mistakes made for sure. But
And one of the
hopefully,
engines is on fire.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
also putting out the fire at the same time.
Yeah.
So how does this change your hiring strategies as a leader of your company?
Yeah. So it hasn't, to be honest with you, it hasn't so far affected our hiring strategy per se. What we're trying to do is we're trying to become more efficient. I think that's the first sort of step towards transformation, which is, how do we equip our team with the right tools and technology today to be able to do more and be more efficient. So I think that's sort of the phase that we're in right now, where can we come up with the same output or, perhaps even more, leveraging some of these tools and technology and make it a better user experience for our audience. So that's sort of the phase that we're in today. But, you know, in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, who knows where we're going to be as an industry and how that will change our hiring strategy. But if you can do more with tools and technology and you need less human intervention, then I'm sure not just for us, for everybody, I think it's going to affect how many people you hire and how many people you need to be able to do the same work.
One question that's really interesting for me, and I use like I'm a consumer of streaming TV myself, like probably everybody else, is how the search experience,
Mhm.
the search and recommendations experience, which is really a uh, a, a follow or a replication of how it works on like commerce. How is that going to change with the new agent model where you have a conversation? Are you looking into that kind of a change in your apps?
We are, yeah, we are. So we are thinking about, what does that next generation of user experience looks like? How do you personalize it? How do you get a lot of the times, for me personally as a user, but I think I speak for a lot of us, when I launch a service like Netflix, I don't even know what I want, right? Friday evening, I know I want to watch a movie or a TV show, and then we all spend 20, 30 minutes just trying to browse and find something, right? That experience is fundamentally a very different experience from 20 years ago when I would walk into a Blockbuster trying to find a DVD to rent that evening, right? And so the question is old going to be new again? Are we trying to, similar to what we did with fast channels, where, we all talked about on demand and having access to content everywhere. And now there's a pretty significant chunk of viewership that's happening on these fast channels where people are just literally appointment viewing. So, can technology essentially take us back to that kind of experience because it was a lot more personal, right, than what it is today? And it helped us get to a decision much quicker than the current sort of process that we have. So these are all, interesting questions that we're all trying to find answers to. And we're trying to do some research, we're trying to run some tests. But it's really, I completely agree with you, thinking about how does that fundamentally change that user experience from a search and discovery standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, as a consumer and as a user of these apps, I mean, I must tell you that I'm bored with their experience. They're all the same. They all think they know what I want because what I watched
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yes.
And 99% of time, they're not recommending things that are new and interesting to me.
Right.
You take from Amazon Prime, the Prime Video, Paramount. I mean, they're all copying the same model. And I'm really interested to see this change and improve
Yeah.
with the agentic conversational type of and more personalized. So, like, ultimately, it's all about personalization, right? How can you personalize? And this is what you started with talking about. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that change in the streaming TV apps.
Yeah. And I think now with technology, with AI, with language models, it's all very possible. So I think it's a matter of time that we'll see some of those features sort of implemented.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about maybe some examples of your campaigns with retail brands or consumer
Sure.
brands. Do you
Yeah.
have a couple of examples we can talk over?
Yeah, so we can, I don't know if I'm, allowed to share names, but we work with, some of the biggest retailers, you can guess them, who they are, uh, a lot of consumer product goods companies, what have you. And the the conversations that we're having, they range from, running 15, 30-second spots, traditional advertising spots on our channels, all the way to, custom integrations, sponsorships, native placements, um, as we're producing original content, potentially inclusion and participation in that experience. So it sort of, runs the gamut. But I would say that a lot more brands are now trying to figure out, there's so much content and we're in front of our screens pretty much 24/7. And not just that, the TikTok phenomena of, scrolling through 15-second, 20-second, 30-second long videos has really bridged the difference between content and advertising. And so if you say that 80% of the content that I'm consuming is essentially an advertising of some sort, right? Whether it be advertising for a product that the creator may have created themselves, or whether it's for a chocolate bar, doesn't matter. What has happened now is we've gone from watching maybe 4 to 8 minutes of ads in an hour of consumption on the big screen, right? 20 years ago, because that's
Hmm.
all we were doing in terms of video, to essentially sitting through 6 to 8 hours of advertising. And this could be content that's created in the form of an advertisement, right? But at the end of the day, when I go to sleep, my brain doesn't know whether it was an ad or a piece of content. And it's all a smudge of a whole bunch of things that I saw, but nothing sticks, right?
Hmm.
So as a brand, I think the challenge that we've all got is, yes, consumers are spending a lot more time in front of the television or in front of a device, and they're consuming a lot more content than they ever did. But the challenge is that it's such a cluttered environment, and you're moving from device to device to device. 1 second you're watching a fashion video, another second you're watching a retail video, then you're watching some guy
Political
jump off of
stuff, or yeah.
skateboard. Like, it's just all over the place, right? And our brains are sort of in that constant sort of pattern of moving from one to the other to the other to the other. So how do we create more engaging, more memorable experiences so that, tomorrow, from a brand's perspective, you have a connection with that brand, and you can remember it, and you could either, go visit their website or, go to their store to learn about the product, what have you. So I think that's where a lot of the conversations are happening, which are, 15, 30-second spots are fine, and we need to play in that space, but what else can we do?
Okay. Do you see different types of product companies engaging more, like physical products versus maybe software and apps with streaming media,
Yeah,
TV?
I think with streaming media, I think what we're seeing is obviously there's a lot of money coming in from television where because consumers are moving away from linear and cable into streaming, there's TV budgets that are following these eyeballs, and that's great. But we're also seeing a lot of money which was traditionally spent in digital also now starting to embrace CTV because it's a much better user experience, right? And so a lot of brands are saying if we can get same or similar types of pricing, right? Especially from a brand advertising perspective. If you're very heavily DR focused, direct response focused, then you may still value the ability to be able to track a user through the user journey and do the attribution and analytics and click-throughs and conversion funnels and all of that, right? That thing's a little more difficult to do on TV, right? You could do QR codes on TV and have people scan them and whatnot, but it's not this, the conversions are not the same. So from a brand advertising standpoint, I think we're seeing a lot of people also from the digital space who used to spend, money in online video, now saying, listen, this is the same sort of benefit in terms of measurement, potentially attribution, because it's still using a digital IP-based pipe. But now it has the premiumness of television, right? So as opposed to running in a small window in a video player, as you're scrolling through the web page, right? It plays for 3 seconds and then it pauses because you've moved. Like it's a very clunky user experience. And as a brand, you may not always know where you're running. But
Right.
with CTV, one, it's more premium content. So from a brand safety standpoint, you're getting much better placements. And two, it's a much more premium experience because it's the 60-inch lean back living room, you know, um, perhaps even co-viewed experience. So you're hitting multiple people in the household, right?
Okay.
So we're seeing folks that were also sort of participating in the digital space move over. I think it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities, speaking from a retail space standpoint, for small and, medium-sized businesses, think of every single retail brand that's on Shopify today, right? They could potentially now have access to television advertising, which was prohibitive back in the day.
Yes.
So it opens up a lot of possibilities for some of these for some of these e-commerce retail shops, and they may not even need to be physically here in the United States, right? As long as they're selling product to consumers here in the US, they could be sitting in Europe, they could be sitting in Asia, but they could still now run campaigns targeting the consumers here, drive them, to their Shopify stores, what have you, and start running. So it's really brought, I think, it's really opened up the space to a lot of these new categories of advertisers, right? Who it just was not possible for them to participate in this economy before.
So as a, I guess an app creator or product creator myself, where do I go to decide? How do I decide which one of these different distribution channels to go to? And like, do I go to Future Today? Do I go to, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely, competition. There's MNT and Mountain, which is another company that I've worked with. And there's like, so how do I decide?
Yeah. So there's there's a few different ways of approaching it. One is if you want to, if you're an app publisher and you want to monetize your inventory, you could build out your own sales team and start talking to brands, agencies, programmatic platforms directly. That's obviously expensive and takes a lot of time and effort. But if that's what you want to do, and that's what we've done, we've built out our own sales team, and we're having these conversations directly with brands and agencies, and work with all the programmatic partners. So that's one route for you to take. The other route could be you could simply work with a third party. So depending on, again, if you've developed your own app or you're using a third party for app management. As an example, if folks work with us and we manage their apps for them, then we bring the demand along with it, right? So they don't have to worry about monetization. We bring it to them and then we share the revenue back with them. So that could be an option for somebody, or there are other third parties that you could work with who would choose to quote unquote represent your inventory, and because they have a sales team and they can go out and sell it. So a few different ways. A lot of the times we're also seeing the OEMs are willing to take the inventory and sell it and then share revenue back with you. So that could be an option if you're launching a fast channel, as an example, with the Roku channel or Samsung TV Plus. You can give them all of the inventory, let them monetize it because they have a bigger sales team, and then they just revenue share back with you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, almost the same thing is happening like to the podcasting industry,
Right,
which is another form of media. And I think for like as a business owner myself, my biggest question always is, do I have enough information and do I know enough people and options to make that right decision?
right,
I know I won't have 100%, but how close am I? Am I making decisions based on 10%, 50%? I mean, that's like one of my, and that's like we are actively looking at streaming TV. So this is like a really near and dear to my life.
right.
So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's an interesting problem, and I think again the industry's evolved, but it all depends on what your long-term strategy is and how you're approaching this problem. For some folks, they don't want to worry about the technology. They don't want to build a sales team. That's not their core expertise. They're in the business of making content, and so if that's what you do best and that's what you want to continue to do, then by all means, find a partner, let them do it for you, and you do what you do best. If you have other ambitions, long-term, strategic, what have you, then it may make sense to make these investments.
yeah. I'm thinking more from a point of view of an advertiser, like
Got
a
it.
brand. And I definitely don't want to put together like a sales team to do any more than I have to do. I want to focus on building our product.
Right.
That's what I want. So I need partners that are going to be out there helping me personalize my interactions with my prospective customers and even existing customers. So that's that's really my goal. And I think that's like one of the things that I'm trying to learn better myself. So this conversation is definitely helped me get better educated and find out about a brand new company and channels that I had no idea about. So it's been really a pleasure to get to know Future Today and yourself.
Yeah, no, likewise. It's been a pleasure talking. I mean, I love, I love having these conversations because again, you get to learn so much, and we all have our unique perspectives, and the industry is changing so fast. The technologies, as we discussed, changing so fast. So I could talk about this for hours.
Me too. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Vikrant.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.